Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka ThrabenU here for a vintage video. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com and we'll take a look at that after round 1. So today, one of the glorious Matt H's has donated to make this deck happen. Yeah, there's two of them running around. They're both great, they both support the channel. And the spice for today is Sarevok's Tome, which when it enters the battlefield, you get to take the initiative. You have the initiative, it taps for 2 mana, it's like an additional soul ring, and if you don't, it taps for 1 mana. Now the interesting thing here is that you can pay 3 mana to exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You can then cast that card without paying its mana cost. Unfortunately, you can activate this only if you've completed a dungeon. But guess what? In Vintage, you just get lands to tap for 3 mana on turn 1. So we can play this on turn 1 with any Mox, and then just take the initiative on turn 1 and just start going. And once we have that, we can use our other things that tap for a bunch of mana, like Ancient Tomb, to go and activate this ability and kind of just keep chugging through our deck list. In terms of the support here, we're kind of prison-y shops. You've got Revokers to shut off opposing artifact manas and other threats like Dak Thaden. We've got Sphere of Resistances for the combo decks, and wouldn't you know it, we have both Patchwork Automaton and Nettle Cyst as threats that are going to scale up as we put more and more artifacts into play. Now, we are not entirely all in on the shops plan, as we do have Urza's Saga that we can activate, and we also do have Thought-Knot Seers as another disruptive card. Generally speaking, the sideboard is going in 2 different directions. There's a couple of traps here for when we pair against opposing combo decks. And then there's some big dumb fair stuff like Wormcoil Engine that can help us with matchups like, say, the Initiative matchup, where our opponent is really looking to rumble in combat. Scattered throughout the rest of this deck list are some really fun things like Strip Mine, like Karn, Silver Golem, which lets us turn our non-creature artifacts into artifact creatures with power and toughness equal to their mana value until end of turn. So we can do something like play out a Tome, use it for mana to cast a Karn, and then Karn to turn this into a 4/4. So there's some fun synergy here. This deck list was designed by 10 Arms MTG on Twitter, and I'm really excited to try this one out. There's a lot of spice jam-packed into this deck list. All right, I love playing Vintage. Let's try to make the analytics love it too. So please consider throwing me a like or a comment on today's video. It really helps out a lot. And if you're here for the first time for Vintage, please consider subscribing and, make me want to play more Vintage because this format is great. Let's battle. Okay, let's take a second and parse this opening hand. I'm actually really bad at putting starting artifacts into play, and Valerian Academy is going to tap for 0 in the short term. This one looks like a pretty easy mulligan to me. We've just got lands that tap for 3 mana. Now, those are lands that tap for 3 mana that don't cast Thought-Knot Seer, though. And I have no artifacts for Valerian Academy. That's a little embarrassing. I'm going to go to 5 here. And trust in the power of Vintage to do Vintage things in a minute. On 5, this is going to be a keep. Karn, Silver Golem, 100% goes back. The next one's a bit harder. I think I'm going to throw back the Tome and hope we are playing against combo, where a pile of spheres and a Thought-Knot Seer that maybe gets into play on turn 1 really goes places. Alright, we are facing off against a Grief. What got exiled? Another Grief. Eventually I just lose my Ruby here. Alright, I am correct. And are we Doomsdaying? That's a second Dark Ritual for 5 mana. Emo Tutor Doomsday? Oh shit! It's a fucking Necropotence. It has been a hot minute since I've seen one of these. Like, I don't know if there's ever been a Necropotence in play on the channel, actually, now that I think about it. Alright, so my opponent has essentially refilled their hand with Necropotence. So that makes up for the Grief and Dark Rituals and all that stuff. They are going to have to discard a couple cards here. Okay, so it looks like after discarding, my opponent activated Necropotence a few more times. So my plan here is cast spheres and hope it works out in my favor, but I think that's really unlikely. I don't know 100% exactly what my opponent is doing, but I'll probably find out real fast. Okay, there's some nice artifact mana for my opponent. Are we delving here? Okay, we're activating Necro again. Not a whole lot of life left. That's a Thorn. Well, I mean, we're gonna keep doing the thing. Like I have one thing that I can do here. We're committed to the bit. I love how low life totals are, considering that neither one of us has done any damage to the other person yet. Man, I love vintage, folks. All right, something is happening over there. Oh, maybe not. Now, Necropotence is great, but like it does come with a downside, right? Like you do have to skip your draw step. So like my opponent has the cards that they're gonna have this game, unless they can funnel more life into this. There is a Dark Confidant. Understood. Alright, and they're taking more cards off Necro. Okay. This Soul Ring breaks even on mana. No, it costs 3. And I have 1 floating. I can't play Soul Ring and Thorn. I just want to play Thorn. I maybe just want to play a Soul Ring here so that I can play Thought Knot Seer next turn. Alright, it's in play. 3 mana doesn't actually cast this. Let's call that a turn. What does your Dark Confidant reveal? A Mox. Mox Emerald, specifically. Okay, so the Mox has been deployed. And a Lotus Petal. So these spheres are presumably doing a decent amount of work. I really want to play this Thought Knot Seer, mostly just to like try to figure out what my opponent is doing over there. Alright. World's most expensive Thought Knot Seer. Does put me to 4 life. Oh-hoo. 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 Given that I'm at 4, I probably need to take those tendrils. Alright. So, sort of awkwardly, my opponent could play out 2 Bobs and, like, have me dead on board to an all-in attack. That said, like, 1 spell plus tendrils also just kills me. Okay, there is a Dark Confidant. I now have to be really careful about, like, tapping things with Ancient Tomb. For example, I don't think I can cast this Nettlecyst this turn. My opponent might die to Bob. Like, they can flip things like Grief. Instead, I think I will go ahead and cast Mox Pearl this turn, and then try to draw a land next turn to deploy Nettlecyst. And I'm gonna try to hold my ground here. Here we go, folks. There's a Cabal Ritual and an Unmask. That is a vintage kill where I did no damage to my opponent. They did it all to themselves. What a wild game. Format's great. Okay, how do I want to sideboard here? So the Mindbreak traps are probably pretty reasonable. I feel about Cage. Cage specifically stops my opponent from casting stuff with Bolas's Citadel. I don't hate it. I don't think I need Ginger Brute here. I don't need that as like a threat to find off Urza Saga, I don't think. Let's assume that I board in these 4 cards. Unlicensed Hearse technically has text. It's like it can dampen the graveyard for things like Cabal Ritual. But it's pretty unimpressive, I think. I think that just goes for other cards. I probably don't need a Karn Silver Golem here. I can kill my opponent with whatever, as long as I stop them from doing their thing. I think I'm in a board like this. I have Mindbreak Trap and Cage in my opener, but no bonus mana here. Mindbreak Trap on the draw is really good, but I don't think good enough to just keep a hand that's this questionable. This aggro is fast. Turn 1 Ancient Tomb, Patchwork Automaton. Turn 2 some combination of the other cards. This will hit extremely hard, but it doesn't tax my opponent. I think I need to tax my opponent. I'm going to go to 5 here. Yeah. Yeah, this is good. This is turn 1 Trinisphere. I'm going to keep this. The mana for Thought-Knots here is very difficult right now. I can play Patchwork Automaton into Trinosphere on turn 1. Probably pretty good. So Patchwork Automaton, Mana Vault, tap for 3 mana, Trinosphere. That's my turn 1. My turn 2 can be Phyrexian Revoker, or I can just play Urza Saga. I think I play Urza Saga on turn 2. I don't know, like revoking an onboard Mox is pretty good. Let's get rid of the Saga, actually. Now, my opponent is on the play here in Vintage. Like, they can get a lot of stuff down real fast, and they get a chance to deploy their Moxen this time before my really scary stuff is down. Okay, Thoughtseize is very strong. Alright. There is a top. This is maybe not the scariest opening hand my opponent could have. Yeah, cards that they keep. Okay, they kept a 5 as well. Yeah, my turn 1 is going to be very good. Alright, I don't like that draw. So, Workshop, 3 mana, Automaton, Mana Vault, which puts a counter on this. And I think I go ahead and just go in here and cast the Phyrexian Rager. And the real question is, like, am I naming the Mox Jet or just the top? I think I shut off the top, but that one's real close. Yeah. They've got some mana. I have 5 power on board. I'm going to be taking a little bit of damage. That's a great draw. A little bit of damage from this Mana Vault, but not that big of a deal. I'm going to name Mox Jet here. My opponent is going to need multiple black mana in order to cast some of their spells. And I will crash in for 6. Opponent's at 12, facing down the bulk of their life total in damage next turn. Our Confidant is fine. I will absolutely take more damage off of Mana Vault. Alright, there's a Black Lotus. Go ahead and cast that. I think I just swing in with everything. Like, my opponent can block the one on top. Maybe I don't swing in with the one on top. Yeah, maybe unlocking top is just too scary here without any hate pieces in play. Let's just swing in with those two. Alright, my opponent goes to 5. Workshop doesn't cast Thought-Knots here, and I also just don't have colorless mana for this right now. Gataxian Probe. That is not what my opponent wants to see here. They probably have to play mana for that, yeah. They've got a land drop. And that's good enough for the match. GG's. These Thought-Knots here are feeling very awkward to me. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com. Moxfield is a deck building website for Magic the Gathering, although it does a lot more than just that. So for example, there's a lot of product releasing, and it's hard to keep track of. This site has specifically pre-con data for you. To say you wanted to take a look at the Necron Warhammer 40k commander deck lists, all that information is available here, and you can see all of the new sweet cards. Alright, I will be keeping my round 2 opening hand here. If Phyrexian Revoker is good against my opponent, this hand is going to be awesome, and if it's not, this hand's going to be awkward. Alright, my opponent is on the play on 5 cards. Uh-oh! Now, Phyrexian Revoker does name non-land cards, notably. Ugh! So my opponent gets 2 lizards, triggers a Vengevine, and I get attacked for 4 this turn. Which definitely stings. I play Workshop, then Mana Vault. I have 5 mana to work with this turn. I could play double Phyrexian Revoker, or play 1 Revoker and a Sphere. And trade each Revoker with one of these, and then try to clean up this later. Alternatively, I can just cast 1 Revoker or 1 Sphere, and then play Mana Vault, and use Mana Vault to Thought-Knot Seer next turn. As a creature that can trade with Vengevine, that might end up being better for me. Let's do that. So there's the Mana Vault. I think I need to start trading with these bodies immediately. Not 100% sure. I don't have reps with this. And we will shut off the obvious card here. And let's see how bad this Bazaar is for me. That is a Squee and a Master of Death. Both of those work the same way, where they're going to allow my opponent to return those cards back to their hand. So I will go ahead and trade with one of these creatures here. My life total is going to be under so much pressure between Ancient Tomb. Oh, fuck. Between Ancient Tomb and Vengevine. So this is rough. Okay. Do I take 4 more damage to blow up that Bazaar? Probably, because otherwise my opponent just has a draw engine with these 2 cards and Bazaar. Ugh. Ow. Alright, pass turn. Wii goes back for free, and then my opponent pays 1 life for the other one. That is good. I'll take 5. I'm at 6. This Mana Vault is going to be a problem, too. Alright. Ruby. Whom? Play Thought Knot. Oh, that's a Force of Vigor. I gotta take that out. Okay. If I pay 2 life to play Phyrexian Revoker here, I can trade with both onboard creatures and then hope to draw something that allows me to untap this Mana Vault before I die. Again, though, not feeling good. I am on a short clock from Mana Vault. Yeah, we're trading. I don't have too much choice there. Yeah, you can wasteland me. That's fine. I'm gonna take 1 here and go ahead and play out an Urza's Saga. I don't have Shadow Spear in game 1. Am I fine playing this Spear? The next turn, I am going to go to 2. Means I can't ever tap Ancient Tomb. If I play this Sphere, I can't use something like a Lotus. Or no, I guess I could still use Lotus to untap it. But I couldn't use Mana Crypt. That would be a different problem entirely. I'm gonna pass the turn here. Okay. Yeah, we can trade here. This decreases my artifact count. Or something like Tolarian Academy, which is relevant. Alright. There is a workshop. I cannot tap this Ancient Tomb. I don't get to do the thing with Urza's Saga, so I'll be going to 1 next turn. At this point, though, I think I can go ahead and play out the Sphere. Alright, so opponent is stuck in the short term here. That's not like my position is great. I go to 1, and float a mana. So it needs to be Lotus, right? Because I'm only going to have Ruby in play. I'll grab Lotus. Pay 4 mana for my Nettle Cyst. I guess I'll just hold this in hand. It's not doing me any good right now. I'm absolutely unwilling to say that I have stabilized, because hasty Vengevines are very much a thing that can happen. Goodbye, Lotus. Untap Mana Vault. Use my workshop to cast a Mox Emerald. I think I still go in for this. My opponent can't cast any spells as of right now. So I think I've just got to get while the getting is good. I don't think I can try to like play defensively and beat double Vengevine or anything. Alright, yeah, my opponent is just discarding here. Ooh. I would like to take the initiative. Note that we do have a basic wastes in this deck for just this situation. My opponent is dead next turn. They're at 8 now, and I get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on my Germ. So this is their moment. Oh. Wow. Okay. I like Unlicensed Curse. Maybe like Wormcoils. I'm gonna have to think about that. That's pretty mana intensive. So like the Graveyard Hates and the Shadow Spears are definitely happening, and the Wormcoils are something that I would think about. I don't think I'm interested in Ginger Brute. I don't know how interested I am in Chalice or Traxos here. Thought-Knot Seer exists in this awkward position where it is good against some of the aggressive elements of my opponent's deck list, but it's kind of bad versus Vengevines. Like, it's good against the Lizards, like, as a 4/4. But I don't know that it's better than the other cards that I want to be bringing in here. I think I'm just going to remove the awkwardness of, like, having to trade and then let my opponent draw a card by removing these. That gets me the first 6 of these cards and Wormcoil Engine number 1. And then at this point, I kind of have to think about the remaining things. I don't know how many Sarevok's Tome I want to be running, and I'm a little unsure about Thorn of Amethyst as well. Like, these Worm Coils are just so good if I can weather the initial storm. I think on the draw, Thorn's probably not great. Like, it can maybe stop a Force of Vigor from being cast, but it's attacks of 1 mana, and it doesn't hit the creatures. I'm gonna try boarding like this. Alright, there is a Serum Powdered opening hand. Gaya's Cradle. Okay, is Riftstone Portal the land in graveyard one? Yeah. Okay, on my turn 1, I do something like Jet, Soul Ring. No, maybe not. Can I turn 1 Lodestone? Yeah, go like Wasteland, Mana Vault, Mox Jet, Lodestone. That's fine. I don't have any hate of any kind here. I guess Lodestone counts as hate. Let's keep this. I have a lot of mana. And it probably leads me to good places. And I can also just like Wasteland an initial Bazaar, unless things get too crazy. And then play out a bunch of stuff as well. Oh, okay. This is the same pressure as last time, unfortunately. So that's double Rootwalla. Vengevine comes in. I get whacked for 4 under an astonishing amount of pressure, honestly. I think I need to start here and just take that out. And I hope something like Force of Vigor doesn't get involved here. Go ahead and Soul Ring. Force of Negation. I wasn't super expecting that. That means that I don't get to deploy Patchwork Automatons this turn. Noxious Revival the Bazaar. Fuck me. Okay. I feel dead. Like, that was a solid start from my opponent, and they get to back it up. That's another Lizard. With Squee being discarded as well, so the draw engine is starting. This is 6 damage, which is not where I want to be. Oh. Dead? I can play some Patchwork Automatons, but I just don't think that is going to beat this board. I am comfortable conceding here. And the game on the play is a whole different beast. I think on the play, my Thorn becomes more reasonable. I think I'm going to go a Tome out for the Thorn on the play. And then I think I call that good. This is a hand. And play Hearse on turn 1 as Graveyard Hate, and then play turn 2 Lodestone Golem. The hand is in pretty rough shape if I get Wastelanded, but is not going to immediately die to Vengevines. I think this is a keep. Alright, my opponent has kept on 5. See how my cards stack up against theirs. As a Force of Negation, pitching a Mindbreak Trap. That's a Mindbreak Trap, which I assume is in there purely as a blue card to pitch to Force of Negation. There's Squee and Vengevine, as well as a hollow one. Oh my god, why? That was brutal. Like, that was Counterspell plus Bazaar and 12 power on turn 1. I probably have to play Lodestone here, and then spike another land to make it to Wormcoil. Opponent gets to return Squee to hand. Life is bad. I'll trade with a hollow one rather than the Vengevine, since the Vengevine can come back. And see how bad it is. I think I'm gonna win if I can Wormcoil. But I cannot Wormcoil. But what, I play Nettlecyst Chump Block and then I die? Fuck. Alright. Wait, I could play double 2-drop? Double 2-drop buys me a turn. So I'll play Patchwork. Throw Patchwork by 1. Name Blazing Rootwalla here. And hope to draw another Workshop. Not in a situation where I can double block in any capacity. Another Vengevine in the yard. These are chumps. I go to 4. The Tolarian Academy when I have no artifacts in play. Yeah, so I can play a Nettlecyst, and then I die. Ugh. GG's. Needed that land instead of this land. Okay, my opponent has revealed a Lurrus. I have 4 mana on turn 1, which can be something like Hearse and Thorn. I'll keep my hand. It's not necessarily the best hand in the world, but I'm going to do stuff. I am also going to deal a pretty wild amount of damage to myself. They targeted themselves with that bauble, and they're doing a Time Walk. They get their Bauble redraw. They're starting this game way ahead on mana. Alright, that's just Lurrus to hand. A good turn 1, but it's not the end of the world here. Let's Crypt. Tome. Curse. Yeah. Knew that was a possibility, but I had to do it in that order, because otherwise the Thorn prices me out of being able to cast the Hearse. I could have, played Revoker on Mox Pearl, but I think I have to get this taxation down ASAP. My plan for dealing with Lurrus is just control the board, and whatever big dumb thing that I do this turn, it just gets to resolve. Oof. Oof. So I do have 6 mana this turn. Non-creature spells, so Nettlecyst costs 4. I really need to murder my opponent here. So I think my plan for murdering my opponent involves playing Traxos. Then I'll go ahead and untap it with Revoker. Yeah. Expected you to crack that Bauble. I think I still name the Mishra's Bauble rather than the Mox Pearl. And then let's pass the turn. Like, Lurrus is strong, but I have the better onboard bodies here. And some amount of taxation in play to make cantrips and such worse. The Time Walk's already been used. Not to say that it can't come back, because this is vintage, you know. When it started paying life on something? Do they have main deck member? Oh, it's a taxing probe. That makes much more sense. Just in case you weren't around for the Lurrus era of Legacy, where this was absolutely everywhere. Once per turn, you get to cast a permanent spell with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard. So you can't do lands, but you can cast, you know, baubles or whatever. Okay, there's a ruby from my opponent. Consider in vintage. And then they will replay the bauble despite the fact that they can't crack it right now. Alright, I really need to win some of these flips. Nice, nice. 2, 4, 6, 7 mana. I need 8 to cast both of these, though. I think I am willing to, like, just rumble with these in combat. Yeah? Okay, there is a trade. That's fine. Opponent goes to 12. Now, the reason that I didn't play Nettlecyst pre-combat was so that I could use it to untap Traxos. This is very close to lethal next turn. I think I go after the Volcanic Island here to keep my opponent off of multiple blue. And we'll see where this goes. The Bauble does become a real redraw. Any artifact for me is lethal if my opponent doesn't have blockers. Alright, there's a recall. That's 2 of my opponent's mana. Wasteland probably doesn't matter right now. Okay, and after going into the tank for a long time, my opponent passed the turn. Alright, I won some mana crypt flips. I think I'm just going in for combat damage here. Not draw an artifact, unfortunately. That is a Swords to Plowshares. That's actually kind of huge for me, honestly. While I don't deal that much damage this turn, my Ancient Tombs and Mana Crypts aren't likely to kill me anymore. And it becomes safer for me to Thought-Knot Seer. Force pitching Brainstorm. Sure. This is the sort of opponent that I'd really like to take the initiative against. Oh-ho. Oh-ho, okay. Go Tails. Alright. How many removal spells are in graveyard? It's just 1 Swords? So if I hold back both of my creatures on the defensive, I can keep the Dreadhordes from attacking, or at least cause them to sacrifice a creature? Well, I guess let's start here. This is mana neutral. I'll have to tap 1 Ancient Tomb in order to play this out. Oh gosh, Breach. Breach is good. I think I need to take the other Swords to Plowshares, though. So if I attack with Nettlecyst, opponent probably takes the hit, goes to 4. Swords to Plowshares, one of my creatures. I think I just hold back. My opponent draws a land. They can Breach and Time Walk. This Thorn is doing serious heavy lifting right now. As well, Grafdigger's Cage in post-sideboard games. Okay, are they just going to Breach Swords to Plowshares and just, like, accept that? Okay, they are just going to do that. Okay, so Source of Plowshares is back in graveyard, unfortunately for me. Let's go heads this time. Nice. Opponent's about to get a pretty disgusting amount of value. Guess I'm taking the Nettle Cyst attack here. Put my opponent to 4. They'll attack Swords to Plowshares and Ancestral. And my plan becomes draw something that I can equip Nettle Cyst to, I guess. I'm having both Underworld Breach and Swords was kind of rough. Alright, then I think I just go after their colored mana here. I want a Slippery Slope in a direction that I really do not like. Yeah, so there's Swords and Ancestral. So they've got the draw 3, and they're up to 6 cards while I'm Hellbent. I'm still alive, don't get me wrong here, but I'm in trouble. I also probably can't play a Sarevok's Tome if I draw one, because my opponent putting +1/+1 counters on Dreadhorde Arcanist right now is horrifying. Lotus, sure. And Ragavan. Yikes, basically. Oh, Urza Saga is really good here. Really, really good. I don't have Shadow Spear in game 1, though. Or a Cage. Non-ironically, I do have a Ginger Brute. Ginger Brute Nettle Cyst is, like, very much a thing that could kill my opponent. Here they come. Opponent gets a Git Probe and a Consider this turn. They liked whatever card it was. Okay, that's fine. So this whole Ragavan thing happens. My Wastes is gone. Speaking of Wastes, I assume my opponent will now Wasteland my Urza Saga and not let me have fun. Ugh. My opponent's used Time Walk. Or sorry, my opponent's used Recall already. So they're going for Dig Through Time. Makes sense. I have lost my flip again. And I think with that dead draw, I am now comfortable conceding. GG. Alright, so what do I want against this Xerox deck? My Revokers don't seem amazing. I'm probably going to get rid of those and just play some amount of Graveyard Hate to deal with the Lurrus and Dreadhordes. The upside of Revoker is that it like trades with early Ragavan. I don't think I need to go up to like Big Bomby Wormcoil or anything. So I'll probably play Sky Sovereign just as something that and deal with my opponent's creatures. What do I feel about Thought-Knot Seers? I don't really feel great about Thought-Knot Seer. I just don't think the mana base super supports it well. If I go Thought-Knots out and some number of Revokers out, and assuming I want, well, maybe I don't need Shadow Spear. Like, I'm looking at these 7 cards, and I'm a little unsure whether or not I want Karn Silver Golem. Initiative is really awkward when my opponent has, like, reasonable, low-cost creatures. But in terms of grinding, it's one of my best ways to grind. I get rid of this stuff. Cage, Relics, Soul Guide, Curse, Flagship. I would need to board in 2 more cards. Crucible seems reasonable. And I could play like 1 Wormcoil, 1 Shadow Spear, 1 Revoker. Karn also could get cut. I think Karn's better versus decks that are just completely stopped by the hate pieces, which this deck isn't. Wormcoil's a bad investment versus Swords to Plowshares specifically. I'm going to play 2 Revokers just as something else that can trigger or trade with Ragavan and trigger Traxos. Saga, Sapphire, Sphere, or Saga, Sapphire, Jet, Nettle Cyst. Probably Sphere turn 1. I'm going to keep this hand. Sapphire, Saga. On the random chance that my opponent has a Mind Break. Or no, I do need to play the Jet first. Or they don't have the bonus mana. JK. Not playing around a Mind Break trap. I do think I just want to slam the Sphere. Alright, it's in play. The next decision point will be like, am I going in on Urza Saga tokens, or am I just going to play another Sphere? Well, maybe neither. Need to top deck a land to play another Sphere. Heyo! Got 5 mana to work with. I think I'd deploy a threat here. This way, if I get wastelanded, I still have something that is clocking my opponent in play. Alright. I'm going to see my opponent play out some piece of artifact mana here. Is a Mox Sapphire. Woohoo! Yeah. So here's another sphere. I can't play this one this turn, but I'm crashing in for 5. A very, very relevant amount of damage. I eat a... No, I couldn't eat a Hercules Recall yet. I'm just going to play a sphere this turn. I will do it pre-combat. Alright, we've got some movement from my opponent. This could be a Source of Plowshares on my Nettle Cyst. Could be a counterspell on this sphere. Oh. Yeah, I am totally good with a recall. Like, my opponent could play like an Artifact Sweeper. Like, that's totally reasonable. That's like something that very much exists in the wheelhouse of Vintage. They don't, they're potentially facing down lethal on my turn. I just play Patchwork Automaton, and that's the final point of damage that I need. Or a Thorn? I guess the Patchwork Automaton can attack next turn if another removal spell just happens for Nettle Cyst. Okay, yep, there is a Source of Plowshares. I will gain 7. Patchwork Automaton will be a lethal threat next turn, as I can just pay 2 mana to equip it. My opponent cannot play 2 spells here, as the tax is just so high right now. The Ward 2 also is probably super relevant here. A Prismatic Ending on the Nettle Cyst. Okay, so opponent is still alive. I'll cast a Thorn. Throw my Patchwork Automaton. Go ahead and take my opponent off of white mana. And bash in for 2. Opponent's at 5. They're likely on a 2-turn clock, although that's not guaranteed. Ah, yes. It's Ginger Brute time. Vintage All-Star Ginger Brute is here. This is 4 total damage, putting my opponent to 1. Okay, and that's good enough for a concession. My opponent has used a lot more clock than I have. I now know that my opponent has Prismatic Ending. I feel confident that I don't want the Thought-Knot Seers. I'm thinking about that Shadow Spear. The ability to tutor up Trample, as well as Lifelink to get out from under my Ancient Tombs, and maybe a Mana Vault or Mana Crypt is pretty reasonable. I think I'm just going to resubmit as is, though. This is a pretty strong opening hand. I will happily keep this one. We get to go Pearl, Relic, into Trinosphere on turn 1. Consider is fine by me. That is much less threatening than something like a Ragavan on turn 1. Okay, Ragavan on turn 1 could still happen. Okay, cool. Cage. Is Cage better than Relic on turn 1? Probably. Probably. Then we will go Workshop into 3 mana for a Trinosphere. In play. They began the game with 7 cards, so like I'm expecting them to have something strong here. Okay, it is a Prismatic Ending to answer that. Sure, that's fine. Bobble is not scary. And I'm fine with how things are progressing thus far. Unlicensed Hearse. So I could have 3, 4, 5 mana this turn. I kind of just want to be Wastelanding my opponent, though, so that I can set up Crucible Wasteland for next turn. I think that means playing Nettle Cyst and Relic this turn instead. Yeah, I think that's what that means. So, Relic, 3 mana for Nettle Cyst, tap Relic, and remove my opponent from having easy access to white. They have to crack Lotus if they want that. I think this one is tilted in my favor unless my opponent has some sort of like right of, what is it, the Replicate Smashing Spree. There we go. Some sort of like Smashing Spree, Meltdown type card that wipes out most or all of my artifacts. Alright, opponent is going for a Consider. Wasteland is very good here. Are cracking for red? Is Shattering Spree actually happening? Okay. My starting point is crashing in with Nettle Cyst. Brings my opponent to 16. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to crack my Relic and look for a land immediately, or if I'm supposed to save it, because if my opponent plays some sort of Shattering Spree type thing, it might involve using their Lotus, and exiling their Lotus would be good for me. I think I'm not going to crack here. Another Consider. I liked whatever their card was. It is a Ragavan, sure. Oh, were they thinking about dashing Ragavan last turn? Is that it? You can exile a card from your graveyard. I think I'm supposed to crack this. Ooh, it's a mana crypt. I would have gotten paid off last turn. Awkward doing that, because now I don't have that wasteland or the workshop in my graveyard, though. I guess step one is see if this resolves. I think I want to play this Revoker in this turn cycle. Revoke their Lotus. Okay. Do I attack? A lot of damage. But the attack is otherwise no good. I think I'm willing to crash in there. Like, if the removal spell gets used on Revoker rather than on Nettlecyst, I think that's a win for me. Not a literal game win, but a line that is favorable to me. Okay. That's pretty brutal. So now my opponent has an unchecked Ragavan on a board where I have no lands. That's just a case of my opponent having a very strong sideboard card for the match. That's a shame. I felt like that one was pretty close to locked up. I think once I had a Thorn. Oh, yikes. I think once I had a Thorn in play, in addition to just like a 5+ power clock, like I think we were done. I don't know, maybe I could have played the Crucible out a turn earlier instead of starting to get there with Nettlecyst. I guess technically I can try to play toward the timeout. Like I'm up 7 minutes on clock, but my opponent has 3 power on board here. I don't think that's happening. And my opponent can also just like spike a very reasonable sized threat from my deck at some point. I don't think it's happening. Is it just Lurrus time? Yeah, it is just Lurrus time. I don't really think I have outs anymore now that like Lurrus is in play. Lurrus with Lotus Recursion is too much here. That's unfortunate. GG's. Okay. I have 2 mana on turn 1. I can play a turn 1 Sphere of Resistance and just start playing or start activating Urza Saga immediately. That's okay, but I'm so soft to an opposing Wasteland. I don't know that I'm in love with this hand. I think I just want a hand that has more mana. Like, it's so easy to play a turn 1 Sphere with this deck. We are playing against Dredge here. I will be mulliganing to 5. Okay, here is a Workshop. I can have 5 mana on turn 1. I can just play Workshop, Mana Vault, Nettlecyst, Thorn, and that's a very reasonable keep. I think I keep my Ancient Tomb here. So Revoker goes back. Tome goes back. And I can play whatever I top deck. Alright. Workshop. Tap. Mana Vault. Tap. 5 mana. The Nettlecyst has to be first here. So we got Force of Willed. So I'm stuck with Thorn of Amethyst as my follow-up. There's a Bazaar. I don't currently have access to a Wasteland. I don't really have access to much of anything. My opponent doesn't need to cast too many spells here. I'll do what taxing I can, but I think this is just going to be one of those times where my opponent blows me out this game. Ugh. I don't feel like this deck is particularly strong versus the Bazaar decks. Don't have like Pithing Needles in game 1, and like the difference between Revoker and Pithing Needle is huge here. So how stacked is this graveyard? Oh, Silver Smoke Ghoul. I take 6 damage, and then there's just a couple of triggers. So my opponent ends with 3 power creatures and a Narcomoeba in play. Very cool, Gingerbrute. Yeah, we're effectively dead. I'm going to concede there. GG. And this is why we have a pile of stuff over here. I have to think about whether or not I want to be playing Worm Coil in addition to this pile O stuff. So Chalice isn't really appealing. Thought-Knot Seer isn't really appealing. I don't think Thought-Knot Seer should be in the deck, honestly. Karn can probably go. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of Graveyard Hate, and then I've got this stuff to think about still. The Sphere effects aren't great, but they can stop like blue force effects and Force of Vigors. Like, they do matter. Evokers aren't particularly strong. I can see junking those. That can get me this in, that can get me this in, and that could be the Worm Coils as well. These are a little heavier, like in terms of mana cost, than I would like here. But I don't really think Revokers are strong, and Thought-Knot Seers feel awkward to me. There's also this. Lies, which is relevant, but I think the lifelink is more relevant. I'm not 100% sure, though. There's no Graveyard Hate. It's just a turn 1 Gingerbrute and Sphere. I don't think I'm into that. Try to find a piece of Graveyard Hate. This'll do. We're going to have 4 mana on turn 1. I can play Patchwork Automaton into Hearse, or alternatively Hearse into Sphere. Playing Sphere is awkward, though, because then I can't play a follow-up Hearse for if, like, Force of Will or something happens. You want to keep this and pitch Gingerbrute here. So always Ancient Tomb, always Mana Vault. Then it's a little harder. I think I will lead on a Hearse because I want to see if this just eats a blue force effect. It does not. Could eat a Force of Vigor in response to Sphere of Resistance, which would suck. Gonna go for that anyway. Fuck. Yep. So now I have to top deck a land in order to be able to play this, which is really awkward. If I hit the land, I'm probably okay. Hit the land. Probably okay. I will play Unlicensed Hearse. I don't know that I actually am supposed to activate this yet. Yeah, let that Icarid come into play. Try to take more offensive cards than just Golgari Thug. Or maybe I should have used Unlicensed Hearse while Bazaar was tapped on my turn. That's potentially the answer. Yep. Alright, so Icarid gets sacrificed. If I tap this Hearse here, my opponent gets to tap Bazaar in response and kind of go wild. I think I just have to deal with that. Take out both Icarids. Yeah. How stacked is this graveyard? Can't cast anything. Take out 2 Stinkweed Imps. Probably just take out, like, Icarid, Silver Smoke Ghoul, though. Just focus on the things that are going to come into play and actually hit me, and allow my opponent to otherwise dredge. There's a Creeping Chill and a Narcomoeba. Prized Amalgam is not the best for me. That's just going to slip through the cracks here. Ugh, my own Sphere has really been biting me in the butt. I don't think I go after anything that is currently in the graveyard. I used my Unlicensed Hearse wrong that first turn. I should have just done it while my opponent was tapped out. I regret that. So I guess I can use this here, right? Opponent will almost certainly dredge in response. Oh, maybe I have to just hold this up so my opponent doesn't get more Narcomoebas or Creeping Chills or whatever. Yeah, that's probably true, like, given how low of a life total I'm at. Alright. Saga's not bad, but this requires 2 power to crew, so I can't play Patchwork Automaton this turn. And crew this to take out onboard things. Once I take the 4 damage, Ancient Tomb isn't live anymore. Yeah, I think I'm just a little too slow here. Curse is not quite what I needed it to be. And I'm 1 mana short of activating Urza's Saga without dying. Yeah, I kind of tripped over my own Sphere this game. GG. Yeah, I am really not sold on these Thought-Knot Seers. They are so hard to cast with Workshop as a portion of the mana base. That said, the rest of the hand can produce 4 mana on turn 1. I can play, like, Patchworks, Mox, Phyrexian Revoker. The Urza Saga is awkward with Workshop here, though. Got Wasteland as a pivot. I just wish this was literally any artifact that I could cast. I will keep this 6-card hand. Alright, Misty Rainforest. We're not facing down a Bazaar deck. Potentially some sort of Xerox or PO deck. Alright. So, Wasteland not looking great. Okay. So, Lavinia here is pretty strong. It means my Moxen are no good. I can still cast big creatures on curve. That's not a problem. Lavinia on effectively turn 1 is pretty rough. Has very much decreased the power of my hand. I don't think I need to get the +1/+1 counter right now. in case that wasn't clear. So if no mana spent to cast it, I will counter that spell, but this still gets the counter when I cast it. Alright, no immediate attack with the Lavinia. That's a Nettle Cyst. That is a non-creature spell, though. So I can't cast that until I have 3 lands. So I can cast that next turn. Wait as long as possible to cast the other thing. Let's attempt a Phyrexian Revoker on that Mox Pearl over there. It has worked. Then we'll go 2 mana for another Phyrexian Rager. This one probably just names Black Lotus. Elicited a response. Just to fetch. Revoker can't hit Flooded Strand. Lotus to kind of hedge against some of the worst case scenarios. I'm fine playing this as a 0 mana card that gives me a +1/+1 counter on this creature, as the plan is 100% just beat my opponent to death as of right now. They're at 14. I've got 8 power in play, despite the Lavinia being very strong against me. I'm not interested, I don't think, in attacking with the Phyrexian Revoker. Yeah, see, this is what I'm talking about. These are just fully uncastable. And Thought-Knot Seer is not a late game card that I want to be playing. Alright. So there's an Urza Saga. Now my Nettle Cyst is castable. Alright, Force of Will. Okay, we're playing against PO. So I'll attack with this. I'm fine attacking with this. I don't think I expose the Mox Pearl 1 to combat in this turn cycle. Alright, opponent's at 6. We have two dead Thought-Knot Seers in hand. And that's good enough for a concession. Alright, for my own reference, I was just trying to find a paradoxical outcome deck that kind of looks like this to help me with sideboarding. So Mentor is a thing, Urkel's Recall, Balance is a thing, so is Fragmentize, Thanks to the Steel Wind, of course the Plowshares are 2. Okay, so a lot of my game 1 stuff is kind of going to be good here. Curse isn't exactly good. I can play Grafdigger's Cage to stop Tinker for Sphinx of the Steel Wind. That is a thing that I'm allowed to do. I'll probably play Mindbreak Trap. Unimpressive and a little awkward with spheres, but I still think I'm going there. I don't know that I'm playing Cage. I still think these Thought-Knot Seers are pretty bad. But this is the sort of matchup that I would want them for. Maybe I'll just suffer and keep them. And go Karn out to play the 2 random Mindbreak Traps. Oh, maybe I don't play the full set of those things. I guess I'm kind of pre-boarded for this matchup. Holy mana, Batman. It's 3, 4, 5 mana on turn 1, so I can play Sphere into Thorn or vice versa. This is 100% a keep. Alright. Some artifact mana coming down on turn 1 is not surprising. Still more shops. Okay. Let's play some artifact mana. Followed by Ruby. Workshop. I think I start on Thorn of Amethyst. Force Pitching Snapcaster. And that one was the bait spell, as the Sphere of Resistance is, generally speaking, the stronger effect. Woohoo! Okay, there is a Vampiric Tutor. Should be getting something like a Hercule's Recall. My opponent's really low on resources, though. Like, they're gonna have 2 cards in hand. Like, 1 and a 3rd mana in play. Also could just do the normal thing and get an Ancestral, and I'll say, like, I'll figure it out later. Ooh, it's Tolarian Academy. Sure. I mean, that's a good amount of mana. My turn's kind of unexciting here, but will become scary quickly. If my opponent's last card is a Hercules, though, they have all the time in the world here. Ooh, it is Tinker instead. Yeah. And a Gataxian Probe. I don't think my constructs are randomly going to beat that. We can try, though. I can cast a Karn, put a counter on this. I'll be calling it a turn here. The lifelink on this is really going to be rough. Vigilance, you know, that's pretty respectable as well. IMO. Go Construct, end of turn. I don't know exactly what I'm looking for here. I don't know if that's the optimal timing of that. Because I just get to do this. These bounce to hand. And while still in upkeep, I activate this. There's a Phyrexian Revoker. I just want my Soul Ring here. Or do I want to play towards, like, get Gender Brute, make it unblockable? Top deck Nettle Cyst? I don't think that's really racing. I think I'm just going to grab Soul Ring. Alright. There's an Urza Saga. Play a Patchwork Automaton. My opponent's Hellbent, so, like, everything is resolving. Yeah, I think my opponent messed their Hercules timing up. You may fetch. So I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I can just kind of do all of this without really thinking about it. Arn. There's Revoker, which I believe awkwardly is going on Soul Ring, despite the fact that I do have one. And then we'll top it off with a Sphere. So I now do have something that can successfully beat Sphinx of the Steelwind in combat. I don't have a whole lot of time here. Another Patchwork Automaton. Alright, so I will go ahead and cast this, meaning that my creatures can now freely attack Anne. So I guess Karn can also attack, right? If it gets blocked by the Sphinx, it will have 8 toughness. Yeah, that seems fine. Alright, we are... Well, actually, I don't want to attack with this, right? Because then it just gives my opponent a free, safe source of lifelink. Yeah, don't want to attack with that. Alright, my opponent is at 19. Didn't want to... Or sorry, my opponent is at 9. I didn't want to make it 8 because I want to be able to activate this Urza Saga on my opponent's end step for if their last card is randomly a Hercules Recall. Be a little sad if my opponent's last card is just like Time Walk here. Alright, I'm at 15. Okay. I don't really see what the holdup is here, right? Like, this is just another Hercules Recall. And then, like, you very clearly have the win. It's an Ancestral? I mean, if you have another Hercules Recall in hand already, you have another Hercules Recall. There's not a lot that I can do about that. Oh. They just fucked up? They just fucked up, or they only boarded in one Hercules. Okay. GG's, I guess. Okay, we pulled together a 2-3 with this deck list. Let's take one more look at this. I think trying to run both Thought-Knot Seer and Sarevok's Tome at the same time is probably a problem. I think it skews your curve too close to 4, and Thought-Knot Seer was basically unplayable throughout this entire league. So if I were going to run this back, I think I would cut the Thought-Knot Seers and like play a Mystic Forge and 3 other artifact cards of some nature. I'm not sure exactly what those are without sitting down and really thinking about it. I kind of want access to a Pithing Needle somewhere in the 75 to increase some of the percentage points versus the Bazaar decks. Some of the cards that I'm playing as anti-Bazaar tech, like Unlicensed Hearse, are only kind of medium. Like, Unlicensed Hearse is a powerful card and all, but when you're lining up against things like Force of Vigor and Brotherhood's End, it doesn't really feel like the best thing in the world. I really feel bad that this card, I think, never got into play. Part of the reason for that is actually Thought-Knot Seer's fault. So Thought-Knot Seer was making it so that I had a higher density of games where I just had an unplayable card in the opening hand, forcing me to mulligan more. So I think Thought-Knot Seer is bad. I am unsure about this card. Like, the hands that I had just were not conducive to actually casting this card. And despite the fact that, like, Thought-Knot Seer was usually the thing that I was boarding out in my rounds, I just wasn't drawing the Tome in places other than the opening hands, and I was mulliganing more aggressively than normal due to the presence of Thought-Knots here. So, results inconclusive. We'll maybe have to try again sometime soon. Anyway, folks, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please click the like button on the way out. If you have any thoughts about things that should replace Thought-Knots here, let me know in the comments, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. See ya!